There are exactly 11 named members of the Zenin clan, which is actually not bad in comparison to the other two clans. I mean, the Kamo clan only has 3 named characters, and 2 of them have the same name, Noritoshi Kamo. And then there's the Gojo clan, where the only named character was Gojo himself, at least until Yuta took over. And speaking of Yuta, I know what you're thinking. What about Yuta and Maki's grandchildren in the new Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo sequel? Don't worry, keep watching because we'll talk about everything concerning the Zenin clan, including Maki Zenin's grandchildren, with Yuta Okotsu of the Gojo clan. Anyway, let's start with the weakest of the Zenin clan, the Kukuru unit. All of them are bums who don't possess any innate techniques, and the only named character from this unit is Nobuaki Zenin, chapter 150. He's the captain, as well as the most skilled swordsman in the unit, and there are 21 other members of the clan under his brilliant leadership. And by brilliant, I mean he always makes sure to take the credit for himself, while the rest of the unit does most of the work. But as I said, this unit is the bums of the Zenin clan. Maki, who was once also a member, was able to kill Nobuzaki Zenin as well as the rest of the Kukuru unit as casually as she breathed. Now, after the fodder brigade of the Kukuru unit, we have 10 members of the Akashi unit. These are the kind of fodder who do have curse techniques, but aren't strong or competent enough to join the high unit, which is the real face of the Zenin clan. We only ever see one named member of this unit, and that's Maki's sister, Mai Zenin. This makes sense considering how she also did have a curse technique. Now, out of all the fodder from the Akashi unit, Mai is the least fodder by default since we never see any other member of this unit. She has low cursed energy and her innate technique is called construction, and it's mostly useless because she has to use up all of her energy only to create a single bullet a day. Of course, it's not like she can't create more. For example, she can create a cursed tool sword, but as we see in chapter 149, it was created at the cost of her life. Moving on, the conversation takes us to the high unit. This is the strongest unit in the clan, and it's made up of members who are semi-grade 1 and above. This means that they are not fodder, but all of them still got absolutely destroyed by Maki without getting the chance to do anything. The weakest of them is definitely Ranta Zenin. He is young, but if there's one thing I'd give him over the boomers, it's that he instantly knew how much of a threat Maki was. That's why he went hardcore with his innate technique called Paralyzing Gaze. It works exactly like how it sounds. By gazing upon a target in an immobilizing aura, he can temporarily paralyze them. When he uses this ability, a large pair of eyes impose the aura that restricts and paralyzes the enemy. Naturally, such a technique also places a massive strain on his real eyes. Plus, when Maki breaks free of his paralysis, it causes his eyes to bleed. He was not impressive against Maki, which makes sense because he was pretty much a top tier at that point. But considering his innate technique and how he is at least semi-grade 1, we can reasonably say that he was very much not a fodder. Next up is Chojuro Zenin. He is shown to be a hand-to-hand combat specialist in his fight against Maki, but he couldn't last a single panel against her. If we're talking about his innate technique, there's something interesting. Chojuro's innate technique is earth manipulation. As you can guess, it revolves around manipulating earth, which makes it sound broken, especially because he can activate it by just touching the ground. However, the way Maki was able to so easily break out of the 2 giant stone arms he used to clasp her makes you realize that it's not the ridiculously strong wood-style jutsu type of stuff from Naruto. Though, for what it's worth, the Zenin clan training ground was built by this old man's technique. Moving on, we have Jinichi Zenin. Unlike Ranta and Chojuro, whose actual rank wasn't revealed, Jinichi stated to be a special grade 1 sorcerer. This means that he was objectively stronger than both Ranta and Chojuro. His innate technique is called Missile Fists, and it basically comes down to using highly destructive punches that are propelled by cursed energy like missiles. In a normal action anime, he'd be a tank like Jesus Burgess from One Piece or Tank Top Master from One Punch Man. But in Jujutsu Kaisen, he gets folded and beheaded by Maki in a single action sequence. But then again, if his opponent wasn't someone as strong as Maki, he could have done pretty good. His fists are effectively like missiles after all. Plus, he was Naobito's right-hand man, which should be a big deal considering how Naobito himself was the head of the Zenin clan. And speaking of head, let's talk about the member whose head was the first to be split after Maki became the second coming of Toji. We're talking about Maki and Mai's father, Ogi Zenin. He is the special grade 1 rank, but because he considers himself to be equal to Naobito in terms of his ability, we could put him above Jinichi. Again, it's true that Maki effortlessly sliced his head, but as a sorcerer, he is strong. He is He's also quite sneaky and clever because he predicted that Maki would return to the clan for weapons. That's why he made sure to restrain Mai so that he could use his daughter as a hostage against his other daughter. Wait, that's pretty messed up, but exactly the kind of nonsense you'd expect from the Zenin clan. Now, he's a swordsman, and if we're talking about his swordsmanship, his thing is reinforcing his swordplay with his curse technique. His innate technique is called Blazing Courage, and it's basically about ejecting flames from his weapon during his swordplay. He can also completely turn his katana into a flame sword in case it is broken. He always has large amounts of cursed energy at his disposal, which allows him to spam barrier techniques in addition to his curse technique. In chapter 148, we also see him using Falling Blossom Emotion and Anti-Domain technique as an offensive weapon. By applying this technique, he makes it so that his blade strikes any cursed energy it comes in contact with on autopilot. A pretty impressive stack of skills and abilities, if I must say so myself. Too bad his head was split before he could use any of it. Now, continuing with the heads, we're talking about the former head of the Zenin clan, Naobito Zenin. In addition to being the clan head, he also stated to be the fastest jujutsu sorcerer outside of Gojo Satoru himself, chapter 111. He got great portrayal during the battle against Dagon, and even countered the sure hit effect of Dagon's domain with his Falling Blossom Emotion technique. Plus, his cursed energy reserves are so high that reinforcing his attacks allowed him to hurt a special grade cursed spirit. Basically, Naobito is ridiculously strong and fast, but ultimately, he was burned by Jogo, and although Jogo left before finishing him off, Naobito died soon after. Then there's his son, Naoya Zenin. It is said that in terms of pure misogyny, Naoya's ability surpasses every other character in the manga, including Gojo Satoru. He was a special grade 1, but also the head of the high unit, which puts him above characters like Ogi Zenin, at least when it comes to power scaling. And this is where I want to talk about the Zenin clan's inherited technique, projection sorcery. Basically, there are two inherited techniques in the clan. The first is the 10 Shadows technique, which was inherited by Megumi, while the second is the projection sorcery. Both Naoya and Naobito had this technique. As for what it does, it allows the user to consider 1 second as a set of 24 frames. The user can then move within these 24 frames, and if anyone touched by the user doesn't follow this rule, they get trapped in a single frame for 1 second. I know that sounds a little complicated, so let me explain it simply. Imagine you're watching a movie that runs at 24 frames a second. Each frame shows a tiny part of the action, right? Now, if Naoya touches you, you must move according to these 24 frames per second. If you do, he'll know exactly what you're going to do. But if you don't, you'll be frozen in place for 1 second, which gives him a chance to attack or escape. In simpler words, it allows Naoya to use the 24 frames per second as a reference to plan and restrict his opponents. He also keeps a certain knife under his clothes and uses it for sneak attacks. And, of course, Naoya possesses exceptional cursed energy, considering he inherited a technique. Overall, the way he cornered Choso and Yuji makes it clear that he was pretty strong. However, I wouldn't say he was stronger than his father, at least not until he became a vengeful curse. You see, when he became a vengeful curse, his cursed energy and overall jujutsu prowess exploded. Part of the fandom argues that cursed Naoya is on the same level as Mahito's evolved form. This increase in his speed is because of the change in his physiology, and it's reflected perfectly in his acceleration mode. In this mode, he takes in air through the extra openings in his body and uses his cursed energy to compress and forcefully eject his air, which in return propels him forward. He can build up his speed to 3 times the speed of sound. He's so fast that he has to curl himself up to avoid damaging himself. This makes him fast and durable, but he made a binding vow which makes his durability weak when not using this mode. To explain it again in simpler words, imagine Naoya as a super fast egg-shaped car. He takes in air like a turbocharger, compresses it, and then blasts it out to zoom forward. When he drives in circles, he gets faster and faster and can reach Mach 3. But what makes him truly terrifying in his domain expansion, it's called Time Cell Moon Palace. The domain looks like a womb with a giant eye instead of a uterus. Everything inside the domain has to follow the 24 frames per second rule of projection sorcery. The rule is strictly enforced, and if you don't move according to the 24 frames per second rule, you'll suffer internal damage. Your cells will be destroyed. It's cursed in the realest sense. You are basically in a room where a giant eye watches everything, and you must move exactly like a character in a movie, because if you don't, your body will get hurt at a cellular level. Though, to be fair, Maki destroyed him within his domain thanks to her zero cursed energy. Ultimately, cursed Naoya is faster than Naobito, and he has a complete domain expansion unlike Megumi. Speaking of Megumi, he is who we have next. As the inheritor of the 10 Shadows technique, he naturally possesses extraordinary cursed energy reserves. The 10 Shadows technique allows him to summon up to 10 Shikigami, and we have seen him summon as many as 3 Shikigami at the same time. His greatest Shikigami is, of course, Mahoraga, but you can't really consider Mahoraga as a proper factor in Megumi's overall strength. The only known character who has actually tamed Mahoraga is Sukuna. That's why, if anything, Sukuna should be considered the strongest member of the Zenin clan, just like how Kenjaku became the strongest member of the Kamau clan. Megumi could also always pull Mahoraga out, but it was more about the option of using a self-destruct button at the slightest inconvenience. Now, even without Mahoraga, Megumi has a phenomenal set of pets. There's the divine dogs Nue, Great Serpent Toad, the Well's Unknown Abyss, Max Elephant, and Rabbit Escape. These are all different kinds of Shikigami with genuinely versatile range of uses. Next is Megumi's domain expansion, the Chimera Shadow Garden. It's a domain that floods the area with fluid shadows to produce any Shikigami he wants. It doesn't have a sure hit effect because it's incomplete, and he can't use a barrier either, but the domain does enhance his 10 Shadows technique. Also, fun fact, Megumi is the only known member of the Zenin clan to have ever shown using a domain expansion as a jujutsu sorcerer. Naoya was a curse when he pulled out his. Overall, besides the 10 Shadows and his domain expansion, Megumi is also quite adept at using weapons. He's shown to be training with traditional tools like a polearm and wooden tonfa, and when it comes to cursed tools, he used to use a single-edged cursed sword, but later changed to a lightweight double-edged sword. But while I'd like to say more, the consensus has stayed consistent all around the world. Even now, after over a year since the manga's ending, Megumi is still the potential man of not just Jujutsu Kaisen, but the modern battle shonen scene at large. One thing I'd add is that after Naobito, Megumi became the next head of the Zenin clan. This happened because while Naobito's will said everything would go to his son Naoya, there was a clause. That clause stated that if Satoru Gojo was incapacitated for any reason, then Megumi was to become the heir. The reason for this was that Naobito always wanted the 10 Shadows technique user to become the next clan head. In fact, he had even made a deal with Toji about this, but Gojo interfered with that deal. However, after the seemingly impossible event of Gojo getting incapacitated happened, there was no Gojo to interfere with Naobito's will, making Megumi the next Zenin clan head. Next is Megumi's father, Toji Zenin, or should I say Toji Fushiguro. Born with a heavenly restriction that completely erased cursed energy from his body, Toji was looked down upon by all of his relatives. They hated him so much that they straight up threw him into a disciplinary pit full of cursed spirits. Despite this, everyone was forced to acknowledge Toji's ridiculous strength, and while he eventually left the clan, it's said that the only reason his clan wasn't eliminated by him was his casual whim. He became a curse user who took money for doing illegal jujutsu stuff, but he sort of changed after meeting Mama Fushiguro. He calmed down, however. She died soon after Megumi was born, which caused Toji to return to his old self. Toji left Megumi and Megumi's stepsister Tsumiki to themselves and went back to a life of crime. He also eventually made a deal with Naobito about selling his son to the Zenin clan once the boy's curse technique manifested. But enough about the lore. Let's talk about what made him so strong. Thanks to zero cursed energy and heavenly restriction, Toji had superhuman strength, superhuman speed, and extraordinary senses that far outclass pretty much everyone other than the absolute top tiers. Also, the complete lack of cursed energy made him undetectable to other sorcerers. In fact, the only time in his life that someone detected him while he stood behind them was when, in chapter 71, we see him go check out young Gojo out of curiosity. When it comes to Toji's tools, he has an inventory curse that allows him to keep cursed tools on him without getting detected. His cursed tools include the split soul katana and the inverted spear of heaven, which can nullify cursed techniques on contact. There's also the chain of 1,000 miles, which can extend indefinitely thanks to the inverted spear of heaven. Ultimately, we know he absolutely bodies the version of Gojo that hadn't fully awakened yet, but gets killed by Gojo after Gojo awakens. Gojo then basically adopts Megumi, and so the deal between Toji and Naobito doesn't go through until after Gojo's is sealed. Finally, the last member of the Zenin clan we'll talk about is Maki Zenin. She became about as powerful as Toji, but not until after her twin sister Mai sacrificed herself. Basically, although Maki had the same problem as Toji in the sense that she was heavily restricted and didn't really have cursed energy, twins are treated as the same person in jujutsu. This means there was still cursed energy between them that was holding her back. However, after Mai sacrifices herself, she takes all the cursed energy between them with her, and just like that, Maki is completely free of all cursed energy. We see her power firsthand in chapter 150 as she pulls an Itachi on the entire Zenin clan. Though it wasn't until her fight with Curse Naoya that she reached her true peak. That's when she became able to perceive inorganic matter. This advanced perception allows her to see how her opponent will move due to the subtle changes in temperature and air density. She can even take hold of these scattered surfaces to move in mid-air at extreme speeds. And of course, she was also completely immune to Naoya's domain expansion and effortlessly killed him. That's it. 12 years after his death, someone equal to Toji Zenin had been fully realized in Maki. What's also funny is how both of them have landed a critical hit on top tiers like Sukuna and Gojo. Toji pierced through Gojo's back during the hidden inventory arc in chapter 70, and Maki pierced through Sukuna's back after Yuta's domain expansion ended in chapter 251. When it comes to Maki's tools, her primary ones include the Dragon Bone and the Split Soul Katana. The Dragon Bone is capable of accumulating and ejecting force and cursed energy. Meanwhile, the Split Soul Katana is befitting of its name, in the sense that it can bypass one's physical resistance and cut their soul. Now, after Maki pulls an Itachi on the Zenin clan, the clan itself is eliminated from the three big sorcerer clans. I mean, only Megumi and Maki are still around after Maki is done with all of them, including Curse Naoya. We don't know if Megumi ever marries anyone or has a child, but as I mentioned earlier, Maki and Yuta become grandparents. Yes, let's talk about the Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo sequel. Yuta becomes the head of the Gojo clan, and since Maki marries him, she becomes part of the Gojo household as well. She has a daughter with Yuta, and her daughter then has two children named Yuka Okotsu and Tsurugi Okotsu. Of course, we can't talk about them as members of the Zenin clan. After all, they are members of the Gojo clan. But in terms of Maki's legacy, her grandson, Tsurugi, was born with the same heavenly restriction as her. So what do you think? Do you want a video on what's going on in Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo? Just say the word, and I'll get on it.